the guided reading itself is when you pull a group that is all focused on one particular skill. Maybe we're working on vocabulary, maybe we're working on fluency with that group, maybe I'm working on letter work with that group. Research shows that this practice of pulling children aside and working with them, what we call within their zone of proximal development, is very research-based, and it shows that the most effective teachers do this. So this kind of program where teachers are pulling children aside, we know is one of the best things that we can do for children. So we're going to start with children just learning about what we call concepts about print. Just how to hold a book. Do you know how to turn pages? When I turn the page, where do I put my finger? Where do I go after that? So we call that concepts about print. And that's one of the most foundational skills of actual reading a book. Then we go into the kids who already know how to do that, and now are actually familiar with all their letter sounds. Now when we put all those letters together, we're making a word. And then from there we go into, now we're putting words together and making sentences. So this is sort of the spectrum. And what I was mentioning to Melanie is that children aren't treated by, well, how old are you? Let me see, based on how old you are, I'm going to do this. They're treated by where they are developmentally. Because you have a 3-year-old who might know how to read. And you might have a 5-year-old who's never really held a pencil. So each child's treated according to where they are developmentally, as opposed to a set curriculum. And so the most important part is, how do we get to real reading? Real reading is really comprehension. So none of the things I'm going to share are about just doing decoding, which is, you know, cat, mat, sat, pat in isolation, because that doesn't show us real meaning. Real meaning is, how does that relate to learning about polar bears, for example? So the lessons are always geared with science or social studies, for example, because kids are much more excited about doing that. So they'll do a science experiment and maybe do some reading books about that, or do some writing about that. So it's always integrated, so we get to real reading, which is comprehension. So familiar reading is what we're working on with fluency. Word work is where we're doing our phonics, phonemic awareness. Introducing the new book is where we're really working on comprehension, what kind of strategies you're going to need to read that book. And then interactive writing is the follow-up kind of writing. So what did I learn about that book? There's a bunch of boxes. Each child gets their own box. They bring their box over. And the first thing they do is they start practicing the things in their box. Everything in their box is at their instructional level, which means they've had instruction with that book before. I'll give you some examples right now. So for a non-reader, which most kids probably will be coming in at this level, what does that look like? So what would I find inside that child's box? There might be something that looks like this. And the reason that we use this with the children is because one of the skills for pre-reading is learning how to what we call segment and blend. So a child needs to know how to go k, a, t. Now put it together, cat. So it's just a way to physically feel what's blending and segmenting is.
Oh, that's very interesting. That's very good.
Yes. So that's one. Another thing you might find in their box is like an ABC book. Each child might be learning different letters, because some kids might have 20 letters and some other kids might not have any letters. So they might have more what we call ABC books in their book bin. Their ABC book may look like this, where the teacher writes the letter and the child picks a picture that goes with that letter. What I have found in research supports is if children have ownership of their learning when they actually cut it out and pick it themselves. And what also happens is when you have like A and you say, that's an alligator, sweetie, but every time she sees it, she says crocodile, then she's never making the association you want her to have. When the child picks the picture themselves, they usually pick things they're familiar with. So even in this case, with violin, I wouldn't have picked violin, but that child can relate to violin for whatever reason, then they have much more ownership of it, absolutely. And we talk a lot about how we don't accept anyone saying, oh, but I don't know how to read. I'm like, oh, there's 3 ways to read a book. You can read the words. Some of you know how to do that. You can read the pictures. Everybody knows how to do that. Or you could retell the story, and everybody knows how to do that. So you retell the story in your own words. Those are all ways of reading a book. So that's actually one of the very first lessons we do when they first come in, because that way they know they are all readers, just in a different way. I'm still reading books to them. Even when they're non-readers, I'm modeling. Boys and girls, today we're going to read this book called Frog Food. Can you all say that? Frog Food. Who could show me? I see the f. We talked about f. Who could find it on the page? And maybe they're not reading, but they're starting to identify what we call initial sounds. Oh, there's a f. Great, you found it. Do you see the emphasis I'm putting on the sound and not the name? We need to know sounds to read. We don't need to know the names of letters to read. This is another big mistake preschools do. Often they spend so much time teaching the name of the letter, then again that relabeling has to happen when they're starting to learn to read. Oh, you mean it's not F, it's F. Okay. So emphasis on the sounds. Anyway, so as a non-reader, even when they're coming to group, they're still getting books because now I'm modeling. This is how we read a book, boys and girls. We start on this side. Look at my magic finger. I like bugs on pancakes. Did you notice how my magic finger kept lifting up every time I got to a new word? Because sometimes children at this non-reader stage, they don't know the concept of a word. They don't know that there's a gap and now there's another word, a gap and there's another word. So we're just teaching them those concepts about print, the concept of a word. So these are the things you'd find in a non-reader box.